Right, good evening everybody. Before we start the main meeting, we have an extraordinary meeting of council for today. Firstly, do I have any apologies for absence? Councillor Stanton.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Right, are there any declarations of interest? Sorry.
Councillor Winter as well. Sorry, Councillor.
Skelton, thank you.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Nater will be late. He's just at this moment finished work.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have any declarations of interest? That is in the extraordinary item for the extraordinary meeting. No, thank you. Councillor Pegg, would you like to, as you were the original sponsor, would you like to present the motion? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Council moves to commend the outstanding achievements of Mr Edge Harrison as one of the 1946 Derby County FA Cup winning team, and to recognise the inspiration that he has provided to future generations since 1946 as a player and supporters of Derby County Football Club and the city of Derby generally. Mr Harrison, the last surviving member of that historic Derby County 1946 FA Cup winning team, has worked tirelessly for Derby City Council's youth service, setting up a youth centre on Stockbrook, which many of you will probably know as Regis Place, and later moved to Chaddisden, setting up the Chesapeake Youth Club and Chesapeake Football Club. Council therefore resolves to recognise these achievements of the 1946 Derby County team by conferring on Mr Harrison the honorary freedom of the City of Derby under powers vested upon the authority under Section 249 of the Local Government Act 1972. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pegg. I do need a seconder. Councillor Barker.
Yes, Mr Mayor, on behalf of the motion before us, I formally second and reserve the right.
Does anybody wish to speak? Or we shall move straight to a vote. It would appear that we can move straight to the vote. Yes? All those in favour then please show. That's unanimous, thank you. I propose to... When are we doing that? I propose to move straight to the next, to the proper meeting proper without any adjournment, if that's okay with everybody. Thank you. Okay, we'll start again then. Are there any apologies? Are they the same as before? All the same, thank you. Any declarations of interest? Thank you. Announcements from me. I have a few. First, to say that a delegation from here, accompanied by myself, has just spent a few days as guests of the Mayor of Toyota City as part of our twinning celebrations and the association we have with Toyota Motors UK, which, as you know, is a very important employer to this city. I had a very enjoyable time. I'm sure the other councillors that were with us certainly did. We're very impressed with a number of things we saw in Japan, and I'm sure we have cemented, along with the County Council and members of South Derbyshire, a very excellent relationship with Toyota. There should be on your seat a flyer and a red ribbon like this. If you've all got one, mine's just fallen off. This has been left by Anne Webster, our Equalities Lead, and it is in support of World AIDS Day on Saturday the 1st of December 2018. Anne's team has organised a range of activities on Friday, November the 2018 to support the day. Friday the 30th of November 2018. This year's theme is about showing everyone, especially those affected by HIV, your support. You can see on the flyer for more details, but I hope councillors will show their support in any way you can. On the flyer, I think Anne's asking you all to take a selfie in your ward and tweet it or some form of social media. Thank you. Oh yes, just before the day we actually went to Japan, it was Remembrance Sunday. I was very impressed and very encouraged. The attendance in the marketplace was as big as I have ever seen. Unfortunately, despite the weather forecast, the weather was not inclement, and I commend the city for its attendance at the Remembrance service. And finally, from me, I have, as part of my charity fundraising, a quiz event at Mickleover Royal British Legion on the 30th of November. Tickets are available through eventbrite.com. If anybody wishes to sign up to another team, come and challenge my team to see who can win all the prizes. That'd be good. Thank you. You will be aware that there is an item on the agenda that would have the effect of removing the leader if it was carried. I need to advise you all that under the Local Government Act, it's 1972, if the motion item 15 is carried, I would need to add an item onto the agenda. The new item would be election of a leader and would be necessary in those circumstances to deal with urgently, as the vacancy would impact on the council's ability to make executive decisions. In the event that the motion 15 is carried, I suggest it would be sensible to have a short adjournment before the urgent item is considered to give political groups an opportunity to repair. Just to repeat and be clear, what I am proposing here will only be necessary if the motion at item 15 is carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is statements from members of the Council Cabinet. Would you, Councillor Poulter, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since taking control of the Council in May, I, as leader, along with the Cabinet, have always taken the advice of relevant officers when considering any decisions in respect of the waste contract. We have a duty to take full cognizance of all legal, technical and expert advice in relation to the contract. Of course, we continue to recognise the concerns that the public and the councillors have, but we must address this issue in a considered, reasonable and rational way. To enable us to make an informed decision, we need to be in possession of all the facts. Every council in this chamber is aware that the monitoring officer of this council has, in the strongest possible terms, made this point several times around the detail and confidential matters in regard to the waste contract. There are continued calls to terminate the contract at this time, but I need councillors to understand that the council is simply not in a position to take a decision to walk away at this point. We cannot terminate the contract without there being serious consequences, regardless of whether that would be the will of the council by a motion or otherwise. The public need to understand also, as being told otherwise by councillors or anyone else, knowingly or unwillingly or unknowingly, to mislead them. The public also need to know that we cannot terminate the contract without there being very serious consequences. Council motions calling on the current administration to terminate that contract do not change that fact. In this contract, Derby City Council have to act jointly with the County Council, and therefore we cannot determine or to terminate the contract independently of each other. We must not and cannot ignore these facts, or to give false impression that we can approach this in any other way. The contracts in place are based on HM Treasury's standard conditions. As many of you know, this project involves funding from private banks. The contracts recognise the need of the banks to protect their investment and to intervene in the contract if they consider necessary. If the councils issue a termination notice, the banks have the right to step in and to appoint another contractor to complete and operate the plant. If the banks do find an alternative contractor, the contract will continue in place on its current terms. If the banks cannot find or do not believe that an alternative contractor could be found, the contract would come to an end and compensation would almost certainly be payable by the councils. An independent expert would assess the value of the project assets, including the site and the plant, to establish the level of compensation payable. The private sector investment in relation to such projects is so large that assets created would have a value irrespective of whether the asset was delivered on time, and their value will reflect their value as a working asset rather than whether they have met all the contractual requirements. Compensation would be payable even though the plant has not been delivered on time and even if the plant is not fully functional. This might sound contrary to traditional thinking, but is based on a legal recognition that on termination the councils would own all of the assets. In simple terms, after termination, the councils would still be able to use the plant to process their waste. That means that the contractor would claim that the waste plant in Sinfin will have a significant value to the councils, irrespective of whether the councils then choose to use it or not. Cabinet accepts that termination for failure to achieve the long stop date remains an option, and the councils have always reserved their position in this respect. However, it takes time to assess the very substantial legal, financial and technical consequences of taking such action in relation to a multi-million-pound contract, whilst at the same time managing the council's current relationship with the contractor. With reference to the full council motion calling for termination of the contract and the more recent no confidence motion relating to it, the Leader and the Cabinet have clearly acted with due diligence throughout and should command the full respect and full support of the Council in dealing with this difficult situation. It is perfectly clear that should a no confidence motion in the Leader of this Council succeed, which resulted in the formation of a new administration, then any new leader would face exactly the same issues and would be required to take the same advice from officers, including the statutory officers. They would have to act in exactly the same way as the present administration in approaching its decisions in regard to this issue. I have to say with absolute confidence, because the Council through its Cabinet had to act reasonably and rationally in coming to the best possible decisions for the city. The leaders of all political groups in this Council have already been fully briefed on the waste contract and Sinfin plant. They are in possession of all the relevant facts, and if they need to know any further information, it is available to them. I say to any member of this Council present tonight to continue to express or support an ill-informed view that the Council can simply walk away from this project without understanding the significant consequences for the councils is at best being reckless in the extreme and would be considered as not acting reasonably or in a rational manner. Mr. Mayor, I would invite those putting forward any such motion tonight to withdraw it from the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Poulter. Could you turn your mic? Thank you. Right, Councillor Eldred.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And actually, firstly, I want to thank Councillor Poulter for probably the first time since this whole debate has started for being vaguely open and transparent and actually informing the public and making public statements that previously information that has been clouded in secrecy and put on pink papers and hidden from the public, which we as the Labour group have constantly challenged. And as much of this information could have been shared with the public some time ago, but was actually kept, people were kept in the dark and this was kept hidden. So actually, to a certain extent, Councillor Poulter, I appreciate you being more open and transparent than you or your group have been up until now. I question why, though, and obviously it's why you've been put under pressure to do that, and we've consistently put you under pressure to be open with the public, to be honest about what's happening with the waste treatment plant and the contract, and you've failed to do that again and again and again. And yes, we may well have been briefed, but as a group of leaders, the only reason why there was a cross-party briefing is because we as the Labour group pressured you into doing that and pushed and pushed and pushed. It has literally been like getting blood out of a stone, and we have constantly challenged to not only get information from you, your administration and officers, but we have challenged to have this debate in public. This debate about the Sinfin waste treatment plant is of massive public interest and importance, and we should be having these debates openly and we should be being honest with the people of Derby. So that's the first thing that I'd say. And you know, what we've had since the 1st of October and since May is just delays and delays and delays. The long stop date on this contract was the 1st of October. That's never been a secret. From the 1st of October, there's been a breach in that contract and the ability to terminate that contract because the long stop date wasn't reached. That is public knowledge. And what we've had since then is delays. We've had cabinet meetings in secret where no decisions have been made and extensions have been given. And then we were due to have a cabinet meeting at the end of November where presumably decisions were going to be made, but that has again been delayed. So what we're seeing here is just delays, delays and indecision, and you not being able to give any confidence to the people of Derby that you are on top of this and that you're going to do what is in their best interest. And I think, you know, what I'll finish with saying is, because I don't want to, prolong this particular part of the meeting, is we can talk about the financial implications of ending the contract, we can talk about the legal implications, the technical implications, we can talk all of the jargon that we like to use in local government, but none of that is any comfort to the people who live in Sinfin and Osmondston and Normanton, who on a daily basis are facing the real consequences of continuing with that contract. And the real consequences of continuing with that contract for those people are the stench that is coming off that plant, the noise that is coming from that plant and the pollution and the fact that we have absolutely no idea what the health impact is likely to be on the local population or the wider population of the city. There were 48 complaints to the Environment Agency about noise and odour in less than a 4-week period about this plant. 48 complaints in less than a month about the noise and the stench coming from this plant. That is the reality of living in the local area where this plant is. And all of the technical and legal and financial implications, the people who live in that area, we have a duty to them. We don't just have a duty to the contractor or a duty to look at the legal and technical implications. We have a duty to represent the people that live in that area and make sure we are protecting them, protecting their health, protecting their families, and protecting them from living in an environment where they can't sit outside their homes, they can't enjoy their gardens, and they can't, frankly, sleep at night because of the noise. So that's what we're interested in doing. What we've got now is a plant which hasn't passed all the tests it needs to do to be fully functional. And we don't know when that's going to happen. We don't know if that's going to happen. But at the moment, we're just rolling on and on and on. And people who live in Sinfin, Normanton, Osmondston have absolutely no certainty about what's going to happen with that plant. And, are still living with the stench and still living with a plant that actually isn't up to scratch and isn't working properly. And we need to take decisions on that. And you've failed to do that, Councillor Poulter, and your administration has failed to do that. And that's what this motion of no confidence is about.
Thank you, Councillor Elrick. Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. While Councillor Eldrick was speaking, I was just thinking back over the past 6 years. Did we, as group leaders, ever get offered cross-party leaders' briefings? No, never. So that's very open and transparent. In fact, last February, I recall, we were actually ordered not to talk about the waste plant. So, that says everything, I think. I have to thank the leader for this statement. Those of us who've had leaders' briefings about this were very well aware of all the contents of this because we've been told it before. So it certainly won't have come as news to any group leaders, although obviously to some councillors it will have come as news, but it's a very useful document that lays out where we are and where things stand. I think all of us could join together and say we wish we weren't in this position. And some of us obviously are not keen on the waste plant, others have different views. But whatever our views are, we all have to accept that we are where we are. It's not a good situation to be in, but we've got to get out of it. And finger pointing, blame calling, name calling, etc., is not actually going to assist with getting out of the hole that we're in. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Skelton. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to be very short compared to the previous contributions. First of all, I'd like to say how I appreciate the fact that this statement has been made because it does make it clear where the council's position is. I understand where Councillor Poulter is on this issue, although I do disagree with him in his stance. This issue for UKIP members is absolutely clear. The choice is between residents or money, and we choose residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I have to confess I've made a mistake again, and I skipped item 3, which is the minutes of the council meeting held on the 27th of September. Does anybody wish to speak on that item? They have been moved. Are they accepted? Thank you very much. Are there any other statements from the Council Cabinet? No? No? Okay, we'll move on to item 6, questions from the public. The first question is from David Walton to Councillor Smale. David? Is he not here? Not here, sorry. We'll move on to question B, Moira Findlay to Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Miss Moira Findlay wishes to ask Councillor Webb what plans there are for the service being brought in use currently contracted to creative carers.
Good evening, Moira. I've spoken to you already before the meeting started, so I will deliver the answer to my question. All contracts with the council are time limited, and the contract with Community Action Derby, in turn delivered by Creative Carers, was due to end in August 2018. A contract extension was agreed with Community Action Derby until the 30th of November, and again a further extension offered until the end of March 2019. Community Action are not in a position to accept any further contract extensions beyond the 30th of November. Therefore, their contract with the council will end this month. Carers who have used the services under this contract are being contacted with details of the alternative arrangements and support in place that they can access. This includes, and there is a long list, Mr Mayor, which I hope you don't wish me to read. but I will just highlight directly from the council in the form of social workers, directly by local area coordinators, by Derby Direct, Derby Homes and the Healthy Housing Hub, via the council's shared life carers, by a commission service provided under a contract with Derbyshire Carers Association, again another commission service with Making Space, by a further commission service, One Advocacy, by a commission service provided under contract with Richmond Fellowship, known as Derby City Lifelinks, by Derby Direct, Derby City Council, Health and Wellbeing through Livewell, and by helping carers to access a range of support and training through the Adult Learning Service. Carers should contact the council directly on 01332 640000, and we will arrange assessment of needs to take place. If carers are already known to the council, we can review their current situation in light of these services coming to an end through the arrangements with Community Action Derby and Creative Carers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Do you wish to ask a supplementary, Moira?
Yes, I would do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you for your reply, Councillor Webb. The alternatives that are listed are on different sites throughout Derby, with no central point of contact, and mainly for help for the cared for, not the carers. Derbyshire Carers is the only organisation providing some support for the carer and not the cared for. Unfortunately, their offices are not accessible. So I would ask what the council is putting in place to allow accessible support for carers to meet up for self-support and to follow the interests that have been followed so far outside of their caring role, as they have been able to do so with creative carers. Thank you.
Thank you, Moira. The issue of buildings and accessibility of service was not part of the contract that was delivered by Creative Carers. Creative Carers delivered that service under Community Action Derby, who were the contract holders, and it is those contract holders that will no longer be funding the service to Creative Carers. Derby City Council, as I will explain later in the meeting, would be unable to give a direct grant to Creative Carers, even if we wish to do so, to provide further services.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Where's my list? The next item is question C from Mick Vernon to Councillor Smale.
Mr. Mayor, we are taking the question C from Mick Vernon and question D together in terms of how they'll be responded to by Councillor Smale, although each questioner will have their own opportunity to ask a supplementary. And they are asking Councillor Smale whether the council will be terminating the long-term waste contract, and if so, when.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Mr. Wren and Mr. Bales. Since the full council resolution on the 27th of September, we agreed as Cabinet on the 10th of October to defer any decision on the resolution until officers were able to provide the appropriate technical, financial and legal information. In this regard, a further report will be considered by Cabinet on the 12th of December this year.
Does either Mr. Vernon or Mr. Bales wish to ask a supplementary? Mr. Vernon first. Yes. Carry on.
Thank you very much for that. Can you explain the whole point of the long stop clause in the contract in that case then? Surely this was an irrelevant act given what Councillor Poulter said at the beginning of this meeting.
Thank you very much for your question, Mr Vernon. I don't think this council ever envisaged to be in this situation of becoming to the long stop date. Obviously, we are in uncharted territories, and obviously Councillor Poulter has just said in his statement, we have got to wait until all the facts are delivered in front of us, and the entire chamber will be able to make a decision as along with this cabinet. And whilst it is obviously very frustrating for members of the public to be in this situation, we've just got to wait until we have the information in front of us to help make a decision. But because we have passed the long stop date, we are in uncharted territories. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smales. Does Mr Bales wish to ask a supplementary?
Yes, please, yeah. The statement earlier spoke of financial implications should the council terminate the waste contract. Can you tell us all the price your administration places above the health and well-being of Sinfin residents?
Thank you very much for your question, Mr Bales. Unfortunately, these are information that we're still waiting to hear from. When we do get this cabinet paper on the 12th of December, we'll be in a clearer position, but we understand that we are in a very difficult situation here to try and help residents of Sinfin and obviously to help the council in its administrative running. We will be obviously looking at this when it comes on the 12th of December, but we are trying to work with what's available in front of us. Thank you.
The next question is from Simon Bacon, again to Councillor Smale. Thank you, Simon.
Mr Bacon wishes to ask Councillor Smale how much per tonne the council will pay Biffa Waste Services for processing blue bin material.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr Bacon, for your question. This question is similar, though not identical, to one recently asked under an Environmental Information Regulations rules. Now, as it was then, as a response to this question is likely to significantly compromise Biffa's negotiating position nationwide in what is clearly a continuingly volatile market segment. I consider that there is a balance to be struck between acknowledging such compromise and the need for transparency, which this administration is committed to. On this occasion, my view is that the balance lies in maintaining the confidentiality of the agreed negotiated position. That is a decision I feel is justified at present time, while acknowledging that as the market situation changes, hopefully in the weeks and months to come, that position can be reviewed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smale. Mr Bacon, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Mr Mayor, thank you. Noting that the Cabinet document in relation to paying the Biffa more money specifically relates to paying them right until the end of the contract in 2020. Have you got a definite in writing agreement with Biffa to review the payment before the end of the contract, as you're now suggesting?
Thank you very much, Mr Bacon. I can't give you that answer directly, but I know the Service Director is in tonight and will be able to give me that information that I can pass on straight to you.
Thank you very much.
Mr George Morland to Councillor Ralston.
He's not here.
Not here. Well done. Oh, no, Dorothy. No, okay. Ms Skrytek's not here either, so we'll move on to H, which is Nigel Runcorn to Councillor J. Khan.
Mr Mayor, the reason this question is being directed to Councillor Khan is because it specifically is about the business of the Scrutiny Board, of which he is Chair. Mr Runcorn wishes to ask Councillor Khan for an assurance that the Adults and Health Scrutiny Board will consider changes to psychodynamic psychotherapy services at its next meeting.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, I can confirm that this issue is already on the Scrutiny Board work programme for our consideration at our next meeting.
Do you wish to ask a supplementary?
Yes, please, yeah. In the light of the growing awareness of the extent of historic sexual and physical abuse of children and the severe and enduring impact it has on their subsequent adult mental health, does the Council support the proposal by Derbyshire CCGs to decommission the local NHS psychodynamic psychotherapy service that is the lead specialist service in Derby and Southern Derbyshire for such people?
Yeah, I think I can't respond on that. It's CCG that funds the service, so I think we can only scrutinize it on scrutiny board. Yeah, the Labour group. Thank you.
Next questioner is Peter Robinson to Councillor Webb on a similar subject, I guess.
Mr Mayor, Mr Robinson wishes to ask Councillor Webb, he's seeking clarification on the improving access to all reference in Councillor Webb's response to a previous question on the Derbyshire Psychotherapy Unit.
Good evening, Mr Robinson. Thank you for the question. My response at the previous meeting stated that it was the clinical commissioning group which had confirmed it had plans to improve access to all Derbyshire people. To that end, I would refer you to the CCG for more details on their proposals.
Do you have a supplementary, Peter?
Thank you. The problem is one of passing the buck, and I'd like to hear what the council thinks is actually happening to our services. And it's very hard to believe that the CCG, which is administering cuts of more than £50 million in the next few months, has got a coherent plan for extending the provision for those people with deep and long-term needs. They are talking about putting on perhaps more CBT and short courses, but that is no substitute for the long-term needs that have been so identified by many people. So my question is, once again, has the council itself got a view in it instead of just listening to the CCG?
Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, the council has got a view on it and it's expressed it many times.
Which is?
Simmer down, quiet please. The next question is from Amanda Loughley.
Not here, I think.
She's not here, so we'll move on to Dave Clasby. I didn't see David here, so Pauline Inwood to Councillor Grimmerdow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Pauline Inwood wishes to ask Councillor Grimmerdow about plans for the Moorways development and removal of the proposed 50-metre pool.
This one, it's crazy, isn't it? Again.
Good evening, Pauline. Work has been continuing to finalise the design of the new swimming pool complex. The priorities have been to progress a comprehensive value engineering exercise and to progress a feasibility exercise to consider whether there are benefits of considering an enhanced design for the leisure water. To ensure that these proposals are affordable, the new swimming pool complex, along with other projects within the council, has been part of the mid-term financial plan budget discussions taking place. These are due to be concluded in the coming weeks.
Pauline, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the answer. It concerns me that there are many types of users of swimming pools. All should be catered for. There's the swimming public, families, schools, clubs, such as the life-saving, canoeing and sub-aqua, as well as swimming training clubs. Fun-type activities, such as flumes, are only one such use. Can you reassure Derby's water users that they can all continue to be active within their own city?
At the moment in time, yes, I can say yes to that supplementary.
Sorry, the next question is from Jyoti Wilkinson, again to Councillor Grimmerdow.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Jyoti Wilkinson wishes to ask Councillor Grimmerdow what consultation was undertaken before the closure of Pear Tree Library.
Good evening. Full public consultation was undertaken in developing the current library strategy, part of which was to identify the Pear Tree Library provision as one of the 5 libraries within the Council's statutory offer. The Council is therefore obliged to ensure the library provision is available in the locality. The Pear Tree Library building was temporarily closed in April 2018 to allow maintenance work to be carried out. Subsequent survey works identified that significant works were required to be undertaken to the building. Consequently, the building has remained closed. Cabinet on the 14th of November 2018 agreed to the relocation of the Pear Tree Library service provision to the nearby St Augustine's Community Centre.
Mr Wilkinson, do you have a supplementary?
Well, again, it's great to hear how many times my name will be pronounced wrong in my life, but that's another issue. But anyway, taking into consideration from this response that councillors, representatives of their own ward and members of Arboretum Ward, people who live there, don't seem to be consulted before this decision was taken to close the library from the Cabinet, taking into consideration that Pear Tree Library itself operates as an important community hub, what impact assessments were actually considered by the Cabinet before they were closed, and what support is the current administration offering to help mitigate any negative impact that this has had on businesses, organisations and members of the public who use that service?
Councillor Grimmido.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The library was already closed in April 2018. It's not financially viable to keep Pear Tree Library open, and St Augustine's Community Centre will be formed into a community hub. Full public consultation was undertaken in developing the current library strategy. Thank you very much.
The next question is from Jamie Darcy.
Mr Mayor, sorry. Under CP12, could we please move to extend the time for public questions should it be required?
Right, Jamie. Oh yeah, hi. Sorry. Would you like, David?
Jamie Darcy wishes to ask Councillor Barker how many decisions have been made following public exclusion since May of this year.
Thank you, Mr Darcy. Thank you for the question. Council Cabinet meetings since May have involved the consideration of 72 reports, 61 of which have been held in public session, whilst 11 have been subjected to exemptions. A total of 16 reports have been considered at Cabinet member meetings, 14 in public, 2 in private. Elsewhere, Audit and Account Committees have considered 29 out of the 32 reports in public, with 3 being subjected to exemptions, whilst 41 out of 42 reports considered by our Scrutiny Review Board since May were in public and just 1 was in private. Our Executive Scrutiny Board considers Cabinet business, so I won't double count these figures, but in addition to that, the Board has considered a further 19 reports, all in public. Between them, Council, Conservation Advisory Committee, Corporate Parenting Committee, Licensing Committee, its Licensing Subcommittee, Health and Wellbeing Board, Personnel Committee, Planning Control Committee, SACRA and Standards Committee have also considered, in total, 126 reports, all in public. The total of the above reports is 290, and they have been considered in public and 17 only in private. The 1 employee appeal and 17 taxi licensing appeal cases heard this year have all been in private due to the legal requirement to do so as the information relates to individuals. A committee or councillor for information will only ever agree to exclude the press and the public when explicitly advised to do so by officers acting on requirements under the various government local acts.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. Thank you. You have a supplementary, Jamie?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Between the closed meetings, the refusal to publish the deal that was clearly done between UKIP and the Lib Dems, can this Tory administration actually call itself open and transparent?
First and foremost, we haven't got a Tory administration, it's a Conservative administration. Secondly, the answer is no. We consider that all the committees and the publication of the reports have been in accordance with the law as directed by officers.
We'll move on. Next question is from Mick Vernon to Councillor Smale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Vernon is asking Councillor Smale why RRS have been allowed to ignore the 20-day notice period before commencing 14-day tests.
Thank you for your question, Mr Vernon. RRS have not been allowed to ignore the 20 days notice period. That should be provided to both councils before the commencement of the 14-day acceptance test. This is still an unresolved matter under consideration between RRS and the two councils, Derby and Derbyshire County Council.
Mr Vernon, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you, Mayor. Back in the July-August at the CLG meeting at the plant, Councillor Shanker was asking direct questions about the submission of the 20 days notice, and him and the CLG group were told by an employee that the 20-day notice had definitely been given to the council. At the September full council, we heard that it hadn't actually been given. So that was a lie that was told in the CLG meeting. So, has the notice been given or not?
To clarify, at the moment, from a legal point of view, from legal officers from this council, it is a no. And this is why it is under consideration between both RRS and both councils. That's where we stand. Thank you.
So, question from Simon Bacon then to Councillor Smale.
And Mr Bacon is asking Councillor Smale whether he agrees that the recycling of garden and food waste must come before the incineration of garden and food waste in Sinfin.
Thank you very much, Mr Bacon, for this question, as it has been timely, as you know. With the introduction of our new and improved free garden and food waste collection, we are very much demonstrating our commitment to recycling. Not only does it cost less for the city to dispose of it, it diverts it away from landfill. This will put us back on course to meet the government's target of 50% recycling rates by 2020. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Simon?
I'll better if I press the button. I have, yes, Mr Mayor, thank you. Councillor Smale, you and I both know that 44% of the black bin is garden and food waste. This was agreed at the CLG meetings at the incinerator. Do you agree that the council needs to do more beyond their brown bin scheme to divert garden and food waste away from incineration in Sinfin, which is creating the odour which currently blights the residents in Sinfin, Osmaston and Normanton?
Thank you very much, Mr Bacon. Absolutely. We must always improve our recycling rates, and I would rather have everything recycled as much as possible. I think, as you know, that we're trying to reduce the usage of black bin is something that we're all very keen on. As an advocate of brown bins and recycling, I would always say use composting. That's the best absolute results we can get. Brown bin is better than black bin. So obviously we will always push the recycling agenda and have as much less going to landfill or to incineration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smale. Next question is from Peter Robinson to Councillor Holmes.
Mr Mayor, Mr Robinson is asking Councillor Matt Holmes for a comment on remarks by Client Earth that the Council's plans to tackle air pollution are not based on a proper assessment.
Thank you, Mr Robinson. The Guardian newspaper asked for a comment on a letter sent by Client Earth to the Council. It's more appropriate for the Council to respond directly to Client Earth rather than via the media. Since May, I've been very happy to comment on this very challenging and complicated issue, and I can provide a comprehensive response to the question as follows. The Council has a very specific legal duty to deliver a scheme that will reduce roadside nitrogen dioxide to a level below the legal limit of 40 micrograms per cubic metre of air, as determined by the government modelling requirements, and to achieve this in the quickest possible time. The modelling shows that Derby has one point of exceedance, which is Stafford Street, and the council is therefore required to develop a scheme to reduce nitrogen dioxide at this location. This is why the council's preferred option is a scheme to target the area of exceedance as per the legal requirement. The council scheme has been modelled using DEFRA modelling requirements. The data shows that the scheme will achieve compliance and no other areas will be pushed into exceedance as a result of implementing this scheme. The final scheme will require approval by the Secretary of State, and all of the data will be provided as part of that of the final submission. The Secretary of State will not approve a scheme that does not achieve compliance. The consultation also sets out proposals that go beyond strict compliance on Stafford Street and invites the public to comment on and contribute to the development of these proposals. These include proposals to expand electric vehicle charging point infrastructure, the incentive scheme to replace the worst polluting vehicles, and a scheme for introducing mobility credits to reduce car usage. The council is also already delivering cycling improvements and has introduced a public e-bike scheme. In the near future, we will be exploring innovations in public transport and additional ways to support active and sustainable travel. The immediate task for the council is to achieve legal compliance, but this is a serious issue and one that I fully intend to ensure is further addressed as part of other future transport-related funding opportunities.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Firstly, thank you for the transparency and the attempts to discuss and meet with the Green Forum and other people about us and the displays. And we appreciate you have to comply with government requirements. But the problem, and I know that you agree on this, the problem is much, much bigger than just tinkering with Stafford Street. And I'm asking you, and I think you've actually answered this already, do you agree that the problem is much, much bigger, that Stafford Street is just scratching the surface, and this is something that's that the Derby City Council has to face up to and negotiate and try to address these issues over the next few years?
Thank you. Absolutely. I really enjoyed the Green Forum and I look forward to our next meeting. And I will always be open and transparent to tell you how I see things within this council and my portfolio responsibilities. And I'll give you this absolute assurance, as I did at the Green Forum. We have a legal requirement to deliver to government on the exceedance and deliver in the quickest possible time, and that's Stafford Street. And you know that option is being taken forward right now with consultation. But absolutely yes, there's a wider issue here, and you have my absolute assurance that this council is serious about clean air across the city, and we will be doing what we can and ensuring that we secure as much funding as possible to deliver on that agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Mr Clasby is not here, so you get off the next question, Councillor Holmes. The last question is from Pauline Inwood to Councillor Grimmerdale.
And Mr Mayor, Pauline Inwood is asking Councillor Grimmerdale what is the medium and long-term plan for Queen's Leisure Centre.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, Pauline. It is recognised that as Queen's Leisure Centre is currently the only swimming facility in Derby provided by the Council, and as such we agree that it is important that the medium and long-term plans for this facility are aligned carefully with our plans for the new swimming provision being developed for the city.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor. I welcome your recognition that it is necessary to keep Queen's Leisure Centre going while the new provision at Moorways is being developed. Can you also assure Derby residents that long-term plans will include a second swimming pool which is well located to ensure that there will be adequate provision for all pool users, as I listed in the last question that I asked? One public pool is just not enough for a city of this size.
Councillor Grimmerdale.
Well, I can take that on board, Pauline, and give it some serious thought. I mean, the latest report on the maintenance of Queen's Leisure Centre is that no major expense is envisaged for the immediate future. Proposals for the new swimming pool complex are to be concluded within the next coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grimmadale. The next item on the agenda is one we haven't used for some considerable time, which is questions relating to Derbyshire Fire Authority or Derby Homes. I understand that Mr Endicott from Derby Homes, and welcome David, our paths have not crossed for some time. Who's asking the question? Oh, Councillor Graves is asking the question. Thank you.
You want me to ask? Okay, absolutely. Further to my question sent on the 19th of October 2018, which has not been answered at the time of this question, can you provide me with the following information, please? How many tenants are paying the garden maintenance payments with their rents? How much this generates for the scheme, and what is the surplus from this payment?
Good evening, Councillor Graves. Thank you for the question. Currently, there's 503 tenants on the garden maintenance scheme. The money fluctuates each year as it's dependent on the number of customers on the scheme. This current year's estimated income, net of VAT and assuming no bad debts, is £107,000. There is no surplus from this scheme. It currently operates on a break-even basis compared to the direct service provision costs.
You don't even have to ask, do you? Excellent. When you say there is no surplus, it doesn't make sense when these charges are increasing each year, yet tenants receive an ever-decreasing service. Do you think it would be more cost-effective for tenants to source their own gardeners, saving them a lot of money whilst gaining a more regular service?
I'm not sure I agree that we're reducing the service in this area. In fact, it's been fairly stable for a number of years. It may be possible that you're referring to the wider garden, not garden scheme, the wider grounds maintenance scheme, which actually we have been increasing the level of service in conjunction with our operational board that's made up of a majority of tenants who've been holding us to account on the standards that we provide.
And you have a second question, Councillor Graves.
Can you advise what due diligence you go through when providing grants to the Enthusiasm Group? Are you certain you know what they spend the money on? Can you also advise how much the grant is and whether the former leader of the council is now employed by them?
Derby Homes has a comprehensive performance framework relating to this area of work. Enthusiasm are required to provide quarterly monitoring information on the levels of service and engagement they provide. All activities are aligned with the Derby Homes Children's and Young Persons strategy. All of this information is reported to the Derby Homes Operational Board that I mentioned earlier. The grant is £100,000 a year. As a grant, it's required to be approved by both our operational board, which is comprised of a majority of tenants, and confirmed by the council. The latest grant was approved by the operational board in April 2018. Any questions about the employees of Enthusiasm, I'm afraid, will have to be directed directly to them.
Thank you, David. Can you advise this chamber how detailed the monitoring information is?
The monitoring information is, I would say, detailed, and I've brought along the last year, 2018 performance outcomes to give you a flavour of the monitoring. 62 young people went through the mentoring programme in the year 2017-18. 621 young people. There were 621 young people's engagements. 1,038 one-to-one sessions were held with young people. 1,840 group sessions as a whole took place during the year.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 8, questions from non-council cabinet members. First one I have is a question from Councillor Graves to Councillor Williams.
And Councillor Graves' question, he's seeking the percentage of our children looked after born outside of the UK and the costs in the context of the whole budget, actual or expected.
Thank you very much. As of 7th of November 2018, there were 89 of the 543 children looked after that have been born outside of the UK, making a percentage of 16%. The costs of the placements are 2.8 million plus 750,000 social work costs from an overall budget of 32.9 million.
No other question, thank you.
There's no supplementary, so the next question is, excuse me, question from Councillor Bettany to Councillor Webb.
And Councillor Bettany wishes to ask Councillor Webb whether 28 Nunsfield Drive, Alveston is empty.
Good evening, Councillor Bettany. I shall try and give you a fuller answer. Yes, currently 28 Nunsfield Drive is empty. It's an existing 3-bedroom house that has been identified as suitable to extend and create a larger family home. This is an approved corporate initiative to meet high levels of demand on our waiting lists from large families, some of whom have complex needs which we are unable to meet through our existing stock. The work planned is for a 2-storey extension providing a 5-bedroom home with extended ground floor living space, improved disability access and a ground floor wet room. As one of the 4 homes initially identified, there is a long lead-in time to set up arrangements with architects, obtain planning and prepare full specifications prior to works being commenced. All of the preparatory detail and planning approvals are now in place, and Derby Homes are currently procuring contractors to commence work on site early in the new year. Now that frameworks and systems are all in place, future properties that are identified as suitable for extensions will proceed to the work stage more quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Councillor.
Question from Councillor Khan to Councillor Grimmadell.
And Councillor Jangir Khan wishes to ask Councillor Grimmadell the impact, he wishes to ask what the impact is on the local community caused by the removal of Pear Tree Library.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Khan. St Augustine's Community Centre is half a mile from Pear Tree, so this valuable library service will continue to be delivered in the community which it serves. The new facility will combine the new library with the existing activities and services within the community centre and Madeley Centre, creating a community hub. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grimmadell. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Grimmadale. How come you didn't feel there was a need to consult anybody on closing Pear Tree Library? Members of the community or the local councillors of the area, and even Norman and Arboretum councillors? We requested a meeting to find out what was happening, and you were unable to give us any relevant information, and you agreed to follow up a meeting that didn't take place. And also, as you are aware, a historic building in heart of Normanton, and you have had no consultation with the community, councillors, yeah, and you decided to move the
Councillor
library.
Khan, you're making a bit of a speech. Can you just ask him the question, please?
The question is, there's 2 questions. It's been moved to St. Augustine Community Centre in a built-up area and from a heart of the community.
Councillor Khan, it is essential that a library provision is provided for the residents of Normanton, Pear Tree and Arboretum. The residents of Normanton, Pear Tree and Arboretum will now receive a complete community hub together with a very valuable library service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grimmadale. The next question is from Councillor Peatfield to Councillor Barker.
And Councillor Peatfield wishes to ask Councillor Barker about the recording of voters attending and turned away from polling stations during the upcoming voter ID pilot.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Peatfield, for your question. As you're aware, your question said it's your voter ID. It isn't our voter ID. It is a government initiative of which we are taking part. And I understand that our officer has gone down to London this week to actually find out the full detail of what they're actually requiring us to do in the pilot. But that having been said, yes, as part of the voter ID pilot, we will be recording how many voters are turned away from polling stations, and of those, how many do not return to vote.
So Peatfield, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Mr. Mayor. That's good to hear, although it's still difficult to understand why the need for voter ID testing is needed here, especially when the only examples of fraud used to justify it are actually candidate fraud. Considering 3 Conservative councillors nominated a fraudulent candidate,
Can we have a question, please?
This is my question. Considering 3 Conservative councillors nominated a fraudulent candidate, one of which took his seat and is now an anti-fraud champion, in the interests of openness and transparency, do you agree, Councillor Barker, that the 3 councillors involved should finally disclose that they knew where Mr. Smalley lived?
Councillor Peatfield, number 1, the pilot relates to electoral fraud, not candidate fraud. Number 2, be very careful, because a few years ago there was electoral fraud within this council in Arboretum ward.
Is that a no then?
Question from Councillor Russell to Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've tried to summarise this, but it's quite lengthy. The question refers to a recent news item on a national scandal about children excluded from education. And Councillor Russell asks Councillor Williams to what extent it applies in Derby, what dialogue has taken place with partners, and what solutions were being considered.
Thank you very much for raising this very important issue. I would want to start by reassuring Councillor Russell and Council that the issue of tackling the exclusion and seclusion of children and young people in our schools, regardless of who runs them, is